Good morning. Thanks for having me back again today. I'd like to tell you about a family that I encountered as I lived around over the country in Middle Branch, Tennessee. And incidentally, don't look for Middle Branch on the map. It's not really there. That's a combination of a couple of little communities that I lived in earlier. They're down west of here, but still in Middle Tennessee. There was a family there by the name of Shortridge. Their last name was Shortridge. Father and mother and 11 sons. No daughters, 11 sons. They were quite a family. Mr. Shortridge, Bill, whose actual name was William Tell Shortridge, was from Switzerland. A lot of Swiss young men are named William Tell. He was a folk hero in Switzerland. But he had come to the U.S. as a teenager. There is a breed of cattle that you may know of, brown Swiss cows, and the very best brown Swiss cows come from Switzerland, hence the name brown Swiss. A gentleman in Wisconsin bought a large herd of brown Swiss cattle. They sent Bill Shortridge and his brother with the cattle to kind of help handle them. And they decided after they got to Wisconsin to stay. Well, later, a gentleman there that lived close to Middle Branch, Mr. Horace White, bought half of this herd from the man in Wisconsin. Bill came with them, intended to come and stay a few weeks to kind of help get the cattle settled and then go back to Wisconsin. But he liked Tennessee better. I can understand that. But he liked Tennessee much better, and he chose to stay here. He'd been working for Mr. White for a couple of years, and he asked him, could he have a week off? Well, Mr. White wanted to know why. Well, Bill was a very private man. He just needed a few days off. About the middle of the week, he came back with a tall, pretty, blonde-headed lady who he had married. They never knew what her country of origin was. She spoke with a kind of a dialect. People assumed she was not from around here, as we say, but some thought she was German. Her name was Helen, Bill said, but he often called her Helena. So they were never real sure what her name is. I don't know. I've not seen their tombstones. I don't know what name she has on the tombstone. But starting in 1940, they had a child every year except 1 year. 1 year they had twins. But between 1940 and 1949, they had 11 sons born, all of them either in March or April. It was quite funny. Years later at the county high school, for years and years, they would have 4 Shortridge boys on the football team, and a few years they had 5 when the twins were in school and in high school. They were quite a family. They had a little house that was on Mr. White's place. He gave it to Bill several years after Bill had come there to work for him. Mr. White would say that he never knew how many cattle he had, or how many hogs he had, or nothing, because Bill kept up with all that for him. He depended on him a lot. When Mr. Horace White died, his son, Tom White, took the farm. He only agreed to take it on the condition that Bill and his family would stay there. They thought that much of him. The sons were named, they started out naming them alphabetically. There was Arnold, Bertrell, Cletus, Darwin, Ernest. Then the twins came, and this was in the 40s, and they didn't know ahead of time that it was going to be twins, but just a day or two before the twins were born, the doctor said that he was hearing 2 heartbeats, and he thought it might be twins, and it was. Well, Miss Shortridge had named all of them, and she had already determined she was going to name one Horace. in honor of Mr. Horace White, who had been their friend for so many years. And she was racking her brain to come up with a name for the other one. And after she had given birth, and they determined which one was born first, and his name was Horace. And she was laying in the bed there, and she said, "Heck, I can't think of another name." And then she said, "That's it." And his name was Heck. Not Hector, not Heck-a-Welder or anything. Heck. Heck Shortridge. H-E-C-K, Heck. Okay, the next son was Luke. He was my age. He was quite a character. I'll tell you more about him as we go along, but she had been reading in the Bible just a few hours before he was born, and she read from the book of Luke. Luke always said he was thankful that she was not reading from Ecclesiastes or Deuteronomy or none of those, but it was Luke. Luke Shortridge. Okay, there was 3 more after Luke. He was the 8th child. And for some reason that only the Lord and Miss Shortridge knows, she named them 9, 10, and 11. That was their names. I knew the people. It'd kind of be funny out on the playground, and you'd tell her, "Come over here, 9. I'm not 9, I'm 10. You never was sure because they all looked alike. They're at Middle Branch Elementary School, and I think Luke and I probably were in the 8th grade, possibly the 7th. I went Middle Branch 7th and 8th grade, but those other 3 would have been 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years behind us, whatever it was. And we had a substitute teacher one day. She was not familiar with the Shortridge family. And I think it was 10 was in the room she was teaching. And she asked him what his name was, and he said, 10 Shortridge. "Well, that's a nickname. What is your name?" He said, "No, ma'am, my name's 10, T-E-N, 10. "No, I know better than that. You either give me your name or I'm going to take you to the principal." He said, "You can take me to the president. That's my name." Well, she goes down the hall and she sees another one. She knows it's another one of them. And she asks him, "What is your brother's name that's in my room?" He said, 10. She said, "No, his real name." "That's as real as it gets, ma'am. I've known him, far back as I can remember. 10's his name." She said, "Well, I'm going to take you to the office too. What's your name?" He said, 9. So she didn't really gain anything. Mr. Shortridge, as well as working 12 hours a day on the farm, also cleaned up at the local funeral home. And the undertakers, very much like Mr. White did on the farm, they relied on him a lot because he was very dependable and he could do anything. Absolutely, the man could do anything. He was not real well educated, but he had a lot of common sense, a lot of wisdom about him, and he could do anything. And it wasn't long till they asked him to become a funeral director because he was so kind. And sometimes he would. In the wintertime, he would help direct funerals, but in the summertime, he had too much to do on the farm. Well, one night, Mr. Avant, who owned the funeral home, needed to go to Nashville. A person from the area had passed away in the Nashville hospital. And he needed to ride down there, and he said, he told Bill, said, "Instead of cleaning up the funeral home tonight, won't you ride to Nashville with me?" He said, "I'm kind of tired and be good to have company down there and back." Well, they ride to Nashville and they pick up the deceased person and they start back. And Mr. Avant says, I need to make a stop up here, and he stops at a service station. Bill stays with the hearse. The man comes up carrying a suitcase and says, "Are you people going east?" And Bill told him, "Yes, we're going back up to Middle Branch area." "Where is Middle?" And he explained to him where it would help me if I could ride that far with you, up to where you turn off the main highway, if you'd let me ride that far. Bill said, "Sure." He said, "There's a catch to it, though, my friend." He said, "We have picked up a person that has passed away. They're in the back of the hearse. You'll have to ride back there with them." And the man said, "I'm not worried about the dead. I do worry about some of the living, but the dead don't scare me. And yes, I'd be glad to ride. I need a ride." And Bill said, well, he got out and opened the door for the man, and he got in with his suitcase, and there was kind of a seat there he could sit on, and he was sitting there. Mr. Avant comes back and slides in under the steering wheel, and they start up the road, and like a lot of funeral directors, I don't know if you've ever ridden in a funeral car or hearse. They ride very smooth. I guess the person's last ride is a smooth one, but I have driven one a few times and have ridden in them a little bit, and they do ride. They're a little longer than the average car, and they ride smooth. And they were coming on up the road, and Mr. Avant was kind of letting the hammer down. And all at once, there's a voice from in the back says, "Is it all right if I smoke back here?" Well, Mr. Avant didn't wreck, but he came close to it. And they passed a rule then, if Bill let anybody ride in the back, he would tell Mr. Avant before they left. And that's an introduction to the Shortridge family. I'll tell you more about them later on.